my name is Reggie and welcome to my channel. Today I'll be sharing with you my January wrap-up. January was kind of a weird reading month for me. I read 10 books, but almost all of them were audiobooks. The first book I read this month is Dreams from My Father by Barack Obama, and I absolutely loved this book. At the beginning of the January, as I'm sure many people were feeling, I was a little disheartened and not feeling too great. And so I decided to read Barack Obama's books that I hadn't read previously. And honestly, this book was so much more than I expected. And a huge part of that is because it connected to me on a very special level. And I don't want to be like,
I related to President Obama. I'm so great.
I'm not saying it like that at all. This story is a lot about his journey from childhood to college and getting a job and kind of navigating his life as a biracial person. And he had a lot of quotes that resonated with me as a biracial person growing up in a Caucasian household. Like, I didn't understand this other part of who I was growing up, and he really fleshed that out, and it just was something that I appreciated a lot. It's never been something I've seeked out before, but it's always something I've internally had thoughts and feelings and things about. Really enjoyed this book, and I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. I think it was expertly written. I listened to the audiobook, which I definitely think is the way to do, and it gave me hope and excitement and happiness for the brief time I read it, which was really what I was looking for, so I appreciate that. The next book I read was a buddy read with Lily from Sweet Love Books. We read The Secret History by Donna Tartt. I alternated between reading the physical copy and listening to the audiobook, and I really enjoyed listening to the audio of this because this is a book that was really intimidating for me because it's so big and so beloved. Overall, this book was super interesting, and I'm really glad I read it, but it was definitely not one of my favorites. I ended up giving this a 3 stars. This book follows a group of friends who are studying classics in a small private East Coast school. This is a mystery novel as the group of friends kills one of their members of their group, and through the course of this book we discover why they made that decision. So it is a whodunit instead of the traditional whodunit, which is a very interesting format and I definitely think worked for this book. But because we got so attached to the characters and so enamored in trying to figure out what was going on, it felt like the ending just wasn't very fulfilling. I wanted more from it, especially since we read so much to get so little payoff, in my opinion. I think the characters were great. They weren't good characters. They aren't characters you love or root for, but they're very interesting, complex characters, and I really appreciated that. Next up, I listened to another audiobook. I reread 13 Reasons Why by Jay Asher. And this story follows Clay, who is a teenager in high school who gets sent a package at the beginning of this novel, and it's 13 different cassette tapes sent to him by a girl who recently committed suicide. Each of the tapes tells a story that led her to her decision and is addressed to an individual person who was a part of that incident. What I love so much about this book, and this is a reread for me, it's one of my favorite books, is that it so beautifully paints a picture of showing how those incidents play out and how they affect Hannah before she decides to commit suicide. And I definitely think if it shows people how much their actions affect another, and even more than that, that standing by and not standing up for a person or saying something could be just as harmful as the bullying itself, is a very important message that I feel very passionate about. So I really enjoy this. I don't think it's perfect, but I definitely think it's important. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars this time. It's still one of my favorite books, but I think because I knew it was going to happen, the surprise, the intensity of the story just wasn't there for me. I didn't get super emotional during it. I was still very impacted by it, but not the same way, so I gave it 4 out of 5 stars this time around, but I still really appreciate this work. Next up, after months and months and months, I think, of reading The Assassin's Blade by Sarah J. Maas, I finally finished it. 2 out of 5 stars. I was just very frustrated by this book. I think that it was slow. I wasn't very interested. I think the best part of the story came in the middle. The last story in particular really upset me. It's supposed to be this very emotionally charged story where we get a lot of character insights, and it just kind of broke down a lot of the things that I thought were being built up in the first few stories in this compilation, because this is a story of novellas. I didn't explain that. I feel like everyone on BookTube knows what Throne of Glass is, but if you don't, Throne of Glass is a story about an assassin named Selena Sardathian, and in the first few stories we follow her after she is let out of prison of sorts, competes in a competition to be the king's assassin. The first few stories are about that. This is the prequel to the series is the events that lead up to her getting in that prison. I'm sorry, I really didn't like it. Then I listened to another audiobook. I listened to The Audacity of Hope by Barack Obama, and this is a book Obama wrote when he was senator, when he was kind of in that transition process deciding what was going to happen next. And so a lot of it is before he becomes president, his ideas and platforms and thoughts. And so it's very interesting to read this now that his presidency is over and kind of compare and contrast his ideas and what happened. And it was very interesting in terms of that. It was well written. It was a little clunky and slow. I didn't like it as much as his other book, Dreams from My Father, but I did listen to this one, narrated by him as well. In a lot of ways, it made me very sad just because of the political climate right now. But I did still really enjoy this, and I listened to the audiobook narrated by Barack Obama himself, which is always a treat. So I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. Just not as emotionally enriching as Dreams from My Father. But one thing I did really love about this book is he talks a lot more about Michelle in this book, and their relationship is just so sweet. And the last line of the book is, as usual, my wife was right. Then Lily from Sweet Love Books and I had so much fun doing our first buddy read of a book that we decided to buddy read another book, and that was The Bone Season by Samantha Shannon. This was a reread for me, her first time reading it. If you guys don't know, The Bone Season is my favorite series of all time. I absolutely love this book. It follows our protagonist, Paige Mahoney, who lives in a very unique world. This is an alternative history, future setting, dystopian sci-fi fantasy. Yeah, I don't know if I can really put it in a box. It is technically adult. It follows Paige, who is 20-something. I think she's 20 in this book. And she works in the underground black market of London, where she is a clairvoyant, which is something that is illegal in this world. And towards the beginning of this book, Paige is kidnapped and things kind of unravel, and we find this kind of conspiracy going on, and it's very interesting. That's where the dystopian elements come into play, and I just absolutely love this book. I can't sing the praises of this enough, and the reread was just as good. I listened to this as an audiobook. Are we surprised? And the narrator who voices Paige is so perfect. She says things exactly how I imagine Paige would. She has this like quiet, reserved, slow paced tone that's just perfect, and I love it so much, and these books are marvelous. I think Paige is the best character ever. I think this world is so complex and interesting, and I'm just a huge fan. I can't wait to reread the second book and then continue eagerly anticipating the third book, which comes out in March. Then I listened to Scrappy Little Nobody by Anna Kendrick. I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. I think it is a fantastic celebrity memoir. If you are in the market for a funny, quick-based celebrity memoir, definitely shoot for Anna's. It's great. Kind of just what I expected. Obviously, I didn't know what the stories were going to be, but the level of funny versus serious, the level of depth and the kinds of stories I was expecting were all there, so I really appreciated that it was what I wanted from Anna's story. The next book I read was Living History by Hillary Clinton, and this is a book she wrote after she left the White House as First Lady, and it's kind of just a lot of questions being answered, a lot of what her time as First Lady was like, and then after that, what her time running for office was like. It was very interesting to hear from her, hear her perspective of things that happened. I did enjoy this one as well, and this was narrated by Hillary, because I like books that are narrated by the authors, especially when they're memoirs of sorts. And I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars as well. The next book I read is Buffering by Hannah Hart. I listened to this on audiobook, narrated by Hannah Hart. I gave this book a 4 out of 5 stars. Hannah is a YouTuber. Hannah talked a lot about how she got started on YouTube and her own personal struggles growing up, and it was so incredibly interesting and wonderful, and there were so many things I didn't know about Hannah, mainly because she's not a channel I watch all the time. I do love her, and I do watch her videos. She's not in like my constant rotation, so some of this stuff might have been public knowledge. I think some of it wasn't, though. I think a lot of this stuff she first delved into in the book. And I found those things very interesting and very inspiring and personal, and I'm just very happy that she shared them. She grew up with a mom who suffered from mental illness, and she talked very personally and deeply about what that was like as a kid, as a teenager, as a college student, as a professional, and what she's had to do along the ways, and it was just the most wonderful thing to hear her talk about that, and I really appreciated it. The last book I read this month is The Edge of Everything by Jeff Giles. I did receive a free copy of this book from NetGalley and the publishers in exchange for an honest review. Essentially, my thoughts on this book were it was pretty mediocre. I give it a 3 out of 5 stars. This book starts in the middle of a snowstorm, and Zoe is watching her brother while her mom goes to the grocery store to get supplies for the storm. Turns out her mom doesn't make it back before they shut down the roads, and They are stuck there alone. Zoe did not bring her brother in before the storm got really bad. She can't find him. It turns out maybe she lost her brother. They live out in the middle of nowhere apparently, and she goes out into the cold, off to the neighbor's house, which is far away, especially in the cold. That's when shit kind of goes down. Zoe has had a pretty rough year. Her father passed away in a caving accident, and then her neighbors were killed. But things happen and get crazy, and the story ensues from there. It's just, a lot of it felt cheesy and predictable. I think the world building was pretty seamless. I don't think it was too clunky. I think the writing was pretty well done. I think the voices of the characters were very realistic, even though I didn't like them. They felt true to teenagers, in my opinion. I didn't really like the characters, however, except for the little brother. He was great. I didn't like the romance that played out in this, or how the story played out. Like I said, a lot of it just seemed a little predictable, but it wasn't bad by any means. So I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. I did finish it. I did enjoy my time reading it. At a certain point, I did want to keep reading, which is the sign of a good book. It just wasn't really a book that was for me. And even though that is all the books I read this month, I do have one more to talk about. I DNF'd a book this month called Frostblood, and I got through 51% of this book. This book was provided to me via NetGalley from the publishers, but I just couldn't finish it. I do have an honest review. I'll link that down in the description bar below. It's on Goodreads. This book really just lacked for me in character development and world building and character likability and just liking the story at all. And writing, I just really had a lot of issues with this book. There just wasn't anything really there to keep me engrossed or caring about the story that much. But those are all the books I read in the month of January. Well, these are. Not all of them, because I read a crap ton of audiobooks. But I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, you should give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already. You should also comment down below and let me know what your favorite book you read in the month of January is. I'd have to say mine is The Bone Season, because that's my favorite book of all time. But if we're not counting rereads, I'd say Dreams from My Father by Barack Obama. Also, I'm trying to do a thing this year where I review all of the books that I read on Goodreads. So I'll link my Goodreads down below. It's always linked down below, but I'll double link it down below. You guys should check it out if you're interested in more details about my thoughts on any of these books. So that's all for today. I'll see you in my next video. Bye.